Oh my god.
Here's Oval. I got a wild one for you folks, and I guarantee you won't want to miss it. I'm going to go over 2 crazy toxic Warlock builds guaranteed to end in someone teabagging you. So without further ado, let's break it down. First on our list, we have a rather unconventional triple GL build that is utterly hilarious to use on people, as most of the time they don't expect it. Flying around, zapping the pants off of silly Antaeus Titans and Spider-Man Hunters is probably the most satisfying thing in the world. I will say that it can take a bit of polishing, but once you get into the groove of things, you can really let out your inner cheese. To best make use of this build, I'm going to cover what I would run on it. As far as subclasses go, I would recommend the Solar Warlock, as it enables you to stay in the air, giving you more opportunity to locate the target and reduce the chance of accidentally offing yourself. And 6 is you can opt for Dawnblade, but I personally play a lot of 3v3 game modes such as Trials, so I usually just run Well since cooldown time is, really low, and it's great at contesting the point. Your class ability selection should either be Phoenix Dive or Healing Rift. Phoenix Dive is better if you find yourself in the air more, but you gotta be careful you don't accidentally get stuck on a wall, which is probably the most annoying thing in the world. Strafe Glide is gonna be your best option as it gives you more mid-air control than Burst Glide. Celestial Fire is the go-to melee option, mainly for the range in case you can't take down the target with your initial grenade launcher volley. The grenade I run is the Healing Grenade, as this will get you back in the fight quicker than running a Firebolt, although the Firebolt does have a lower charge time and can be used offensively. Aspect-wise, with this build, you're going to want to run Icarus Dash and Heat Rises. This build will not work without both, which I will explain in a moment. As far as fragments go, I would recommend using Ember of Char, not so much for the added Scorch, but more so for the 10 plus discipline that you get, so you can continue to activate Heat Rising more often. The same thing goes for Ember of Beams. Having improved solar projectiles is practically meaningless running Well, but super important for the plus 10 intellect. Possibly the only fragment I have for the additional effect is Ember of Solace for the healing grenades that I use. And last but not least, Ember of Syrian for the plus 10 recovery. So for the most part in this build, I run the fragments to better complement the stats on the build. On the equipment side of things, I run void targeting and kinetic targeting on my helmet, although I will admit this probably won't amount to much. You could argue that running Dynamo would be better choice, as it does generate your super faster upon activating your class ability near your target, which I sometimes do when casting Phoenix Dive, as casting Phoenix Dive next to an opponent with Heat Rising active does deal a little bit of Scorch damage, and can be moderately effective depending upon the situation. It's very important to play both the Kinetic and Void Loader mods on your gauntlets to facilitate a faster reload time on your grenade launchers when you can't Icarus Dash reload them. I run Fastball even with the healing grenades, just in case I need to chuck one at a teammate that's across the map that I see that's in danger. Unflinching mods aren't going to be much help with this build, so you don't really have to worry too much about them. Lastly, for this build to function correctly, we are going to be using the Rain of Fire boots. Now you might be thinking, isn't that for a fusion rifle? And you would be correct in thinking that, although they work exceptionally well with this, as they also reload every weapon in your inventory after activating Icarus Dash. That's why you'll have to have both Icarus Dash and Heat Rising, because upon the activation of Heat Rising, you also get the ability to dodge twice, something you used to be able to do without having to consume your grenade. Now I run the Recuperation, Invigoration, and Innervation mods on my boots, in case they pick up an orb, although on this build you could argue that a Void and Kinetic holster could work just as well, although really kind of crutch to dodge and you won't have to really worry about this. Then on your bond, I would run Bomber for when you activate your class ability. Getting your grenade back faster is really good for this build, along with Outreach to get your melee back at the same time. And finally, Utility Kickstart to get some of your class ability back right after using it. As for weapons, any primary grenade launcher will work wonders for this, but if you don't have one like I didn't, you can still get Pardon My Dust from Dares of Eternity and craft it. I run Confined Launch Implosion rounds, Perpetual Motion Enhanced with Demolitionist Enhanced on mine. As for the mod, I would run Freehand Grip on any version of the primary grenade launcher you decide to use, as most of the time you'll be firing from the hip anyways, you might as well get the most out of it. And then as far as the secondary, of course you're going to want to run Fighting Lion, as that has infinite ammo. The trick to using this build effectively is hot swapping. Your initial GL burst has a potential of one-shotting, and if it doesn't, you swap to Fighting Lion. But if that doesn't do the trick, you dodge, fire another Fighting Lion shot, melee if you have one. If that still doesn't do the trick, well, all you can really do is reload or wait for your dodge to come back again. In most instances, the 3 chances you get are usually enough to defeat an opponent 6 times over, but you know, practice makes perfect. This build is crazy fun to run and is absolutely obnoxious to go against. Running this will definitely cause many people to hate you, but you know, it's just a game, and in the end, the goal is to have fun, right? Might take some doing, but you'll get there. The next build I have is for the Stasis Warlock. Oh yes, the epitome of Destiny hell. All these titans running around with conditional, only to find themselves on the wrong end of their own ice. Nothing is more sublime than running through a titan shield and shattering the silly titan hiding behind it. So let's see how we make this work in the Crucible. So to start things off with, just like on our triple grenade launcher build, we're going to be running a healing rift, as it's always going to be more practical to use this in PvP over empowering rift. First slide for your movement ability, as this will get you places quicker. You only got the one choice in melee, and with this build you will of course need to be running cold snap grenades. As for aspects, we're going with Ice Flare bolts, which upon shattering and frozen targets spawn seekers to freeze even more targets, and Frost Pulse for when you activate your rift, you have a chance to freeze targets nearby. I will mention that the AoE of the rift is fairly substantial. Best practice is to use it behind a corner. Fragment-wise, I would run Whisper of Conduction, which unlike a lot of fragments gives you a plus 20 on stats, specifically Intellect and Resilience. Whisper of Chains for that plus 10 recovery, and Whisper of Shards for the plus 10 resilience that gives. And finally, I would run Whisper of Rendering for that extra damage primary ammo does against frozen targets, as it can sometimes be rather tough to defeat enemies with your primary once they are frozen. Most of the fragments for this build you can mix and match as you wish. I've pretty much tried all these fragments, and most of them don't really help much for the build, which is why I've just decided to use them to my benefit towards my stats. With this build, we will be running the Osmiomancy Gauntlets, which double the effective range of your Cold Snap grenades. That being said, your armor mod should be tied with the weapon that you decide to use with this build. There are many weapons that work well with this build, but the most practical are going to be weapons that have far reach, such as a sniper rifle, a grenade launcher, a rapid fire fusion, or a slug shotgun, are just some examples of special weapons that can work with this build. I run tier 100 discipline for this to work most effectively, and as far as builds go, if you don't have 100 recovery, you are throwing for no reason. That ties into your rift, which we've already established can also freeze targets. You don't really need to worry much about mobility, intellect, or strength. Super takes forever to get, even at tier 100. It takes like 7 minutes, which is crazy long in trials. You probably won't ever get it. I run a modest 7, but if you can't do that, it probably won't matter much anyways. Strength isn't really all that important because the melee isn't all that cracked. It's got like a range of about 3 feet, and the AoE isn't all that special either. Plus, it takes forever to come back even at high margins. Best to crouch on that grenade and rift instead. I pretty much try to have at least 6 resil on all my builds. 6 resil is usually enough to prevent a lot of silly stuff from happening to you, but it doesn't really matter that much. As a Shadebinder, you're going to be slow, but that's okay. Using the strength of your abilities more than makes up for this. So the mobility stat, more than anything else here, doesn't need to be high. For reference, mine is only 2. This build relies heavily on having a grenade, so having Bomber with utility kickstart, just like the other build, is going to be pretty important. I don't even really like to push fights until I have a grenade or something to freeze somebody with. I mean, why run the build if you aren't going to use it, right? That being said, I don't push anything until I see somebody's frozen. Although, if I am close enough, I'll sometimes throw the grenade with the anticipation that somebody will try to avoid it, usually by jumping, and then completely ruin them in the process of doing so. And there you have it, folks. 2 completely cringeworthy builds that will cause your opponents to snap their keyboards in half. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked what you've seen, make sure to sub as I post weekly and check out my Twitch, where I help fellow Guardians to the Lighthouse every week. Bye for now.